On this episode of TLC Connections, we sit down with Chris Dormer, Superintendent of Norristown Area School District, to discuss his journey into education and his commitment to empowering students and communities. From meeting the socio-emotional needs of students to innovative education programs and learning environments, Chris shares how empathy and connection drive his approach to preparing students for a global society. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to TLC Connections, the podcast where educators, counselors, coaches, and community leaders come together to inspire change, one connection at a time.
Chris, thank you for coming.
Thanks, GT. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. The listeners have already heard your introduction. They know who you are. I just want to jump right into it. So
Absolutely.
Let's just talk about like trends, kind of global trends as it relates to education. And you mentioned, you and I went to high school a few years ago. A lot has changed since then. The question is, what are the biggest challenges that the community as a whole, families, students, what are they facing that we didn't have to face? And the first thing that comes to my mind is like the internet wasn't a thing when we were
right.
And then social media. Mm-hmm. And now most recently AI and how that's going to change just education in general. So your thoughts on like the macro trends in education, but also in mental and behavioral health as well.
Sure. I think some of the biggest changes, GT, and I think you hit it, is just, how technology has impacted just, we'll say, life, and, when you and I went to school just a couple of years ago, the world was a smaller place.
Yeah.
And what technology has really allowed for is, really just the idea, and I think, we actually reflected this in our district mission statement a couple of years ago, was, we used to say, to paraphrase, it was always to educate students, so that they can contribute to a diverse society. We actually expanded that and said to be prepared, for a global society, because that's what technology has done. It has really shrunk the world because you can be anywhere via technology instantaneously now.
Yep.
Absolutely instantaneously. And that has impacted the job market. That has impacted post-secondary education because, before it was, to me, it was very, very straightforward path. When we graduated high school, right? It was graduated and, you went to an in-person college or you went to work or you went to the military, you went to an in-person trade school. You finished and you probably were, depending where you went to school, were probably looking at a somewhat local job market, regional job market.
Yeah.
And, that's how I grew up in Southeast PA and that's where I landed. Went to school in LaSalle and Philadelphia. Stayed in the education market right here because that's what it was, Yeah. And now because of technology, you can go to school, you could live here and basically go to school anywhere in the world.
Right.
You could live here and work for any company in the world.
Right.
And to me, the skill set to navigate that is just different than, again, the very traditional pieces. It requires a level of technology, a level of expertise to navigate technology. But I also think technology has done two other things. One is, yes, it has shrunk the world. It has greatly sped up the world. The mindset of speed at which information can be accessed, the speed at which people can connect, has just changed life. But I think I'm not going to say negative ways, but I think there are definite pluses and minuses. How kids and younger people have also been rewired because of technology is the speed at which we'll say wants and needs are met. And I think it affects everything we do.
Well, and that's partly driven by social media too, this idea of like instant gratification.
Correct.
Like you hear a ding on your phone and you get that dopamine hit and communication has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter to where
Correct.
You don't even write in complete sentences anymore, but just a few symbols, and that's how you're communicating with your peers.
Yeah. I mean, just look at how something like YouTube, I'm not even going to TikTok or the other things, but like look at the platform of YouTube that's been around probably whatever, a decade now, where YouTube started with, we'll say whatever the length of videos are.
Yeah.
The most popular part of YouTube are the short reels now
shorts.
that are like literally 15, like you said, 5, 10, 15, 30-second hits. And that's And when you watch young people, that's what they're doing. It's TikTok, which is limited. It's the Instagram Reels, which are short. It's the YouTube Shorts, which are going there. And again, I think it's been an evolution. I'm not going to necessarily say, I would say probably a negative one, and just in terms of attention span and things like that. But again, when you're talking about preparing kids for a future, it definitely has impacted.
Yeah.
It's impacted the kinds of jobs. It impacts all those things. And I think, a lot of teachers, and I think, what do we as adults default to, right? We default to either the way we did or learned something or what we're most comfortable with. Well, when you and I went to high school just a couple of years ago, right? We didn't have tech in the classrooms. It was books, paper, pencil, those kind of things. It was, again, this idea of like things might take a little bit longer.
Right.
That's not where kids are at today. Right.
And small business also, small business has always been kind of the engine behind GDP and employment in America. But the nature of small business has changed. Mm-hmm. So years ago, small business meant, for example, in the case of my mother and father was a small business, and even my brother, small business where you're working with your hands, but and your clients are more local clients in that community. Today, small businesses you can start a podcast channel, start a YouTube channel, and reach the entire world. And, this notion of a career as an influencer, I mean, a lot of young people aspire to that, and certainly many have been successful. But it too is still a lot of hard work. But
also, GT, where you talk about, just awareness of the, the mental health piece of this, the brain science, the psychology of, how much screen time and things like that. We're also trying to be very, very mindful of an intentionality. Like, you just don't do screen time for the sake of doing screen time. Have a purpose, but there are times when it is good to sit there, get your hands dirty with the science experiment. Handwriting skills. You really need to take a balanced approach. And the world as we know it, all the phenomenon of this world, all the experiences are not driven through a screen either. There's ways we can report on that. There's ways that we can, like we said, we live in Norristown, where if we're studying ancient Egypt, we're not going to be able to get on a plane and go there. Technology gets us there.
Right.
However, if we want to learn about ecosystems and we want to learn about nature, you're not getting that authentic experience through a screen. You still need to get out there and touch a tree, feel paper, touch sand, pet a dog. All these things I think are, we can't lose sight of just because the technology is the easiest way to do it. We need to continue to look at what is the best experience for students.
Well, AI, in particular large language models, are going to make that even harder. I mean, you talked about perhaps, there's an argument to be made whether or not you need to know cursive writing, and there's arguments on both sides. There's a new argument on whether you need to know how to write at all, given tools like the large language models like ChatGPT, for example. What are your thoughts on ChatGPT and other large language models, and how do teachers integrate, or do they integrate that into the classroom? How do we teach kids at a younger age to use these tools, or do we not? Do we focus on those basic skills of writing and not introduce them to the tools later? And I don't know the answer to that.
No, and I think this is going to be an evolving discussion, GT, in education and in the work world as well. Because you think about the success of businesses is often on a proprietary either idea or concept or something.
Yeah.
And how are you going to define that if AI now can generate that? Is it proprietary to the human, to the company, I think it's going to blur the lines a little bit.
Right.
But, when you go back and, I always try to go back into, as a school district, what are we hoping to do, right? We're hoping as our mission to educate and inspire each and every child. To what end, right? And I think one thing we've heard from the business world is what they are looking us to do in K-12 to get the future workforce ready, right? Mm-hmm. And it goes beyond, and I think, again, this is a little bit of an evolution, because like when you and I went to school, it was all about, I know when I went, it was like, go to college, and to do that, you need X number of credits, and you need to study, and you need like this fact-based knowledge base, right?
Right.
That's not the working world today, right? Employers, what do they, when you talk of employers of like, what are you looking for? Some common themes. They're looking for people that are creative. people that can problem solve, people that can communicate,
Yeah.
people that can work as part of a team, people that, again, these more, I know they refer to them as, it's funny that the world calls them soft skills, and I think that is such a dismissive approach of that.
Right.
If employers are saying that's most important, why do we call them soft like it's something lesser? I know
Right.
we have in Norristown, I call them essential skills.
Yeah.
We actually built our portrait of a graduate around those things, about being a lifelong learner, about being an effective communicator, about being able to, creatively and critically think. Those, I think, are the important pieces. And if those are the important pieces of what we're trying to do with kids, and not just get 23 credits and meet your Act 158 pathway and move on, right? We're really trying to get you life ready of what will have you successful in life and hopefully keep you employable. You back map that. And that's where I think AI should and can be used as a valuable tool. And I know there's fear about cheating and all these other pieces, but if we look at it as a tool and teach the appropriate use of it as a tool and put the right guardrails around it, to me, like AI is not only going to influence K-12 education, like businesses are going to use it.
They're already using it.
And they're using it very effectively because how are they using it, GT? They're using it as a tool to help problem solve, to help the creativity, to help a communication platform.
It's
right?
essentially an efficiency tool. It's helping you.
Correct.
It doesn't replace the human. It helps
Correct.
the human become much more efficient, which drives productivity, which drives growth.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think, in the K-12 world, we've got to embrace it that way. And I think the mindset of what we're, quote unquote, teaching kids and what we're getting kids to learn is, again, we need to teach kids how to think and not a discrete set of knowledge or, yes, there's going to be a discrete set of skills we want them to get, like particularly math and reading and writing, right? But I think it's going to get so much more sophisticated that we have to teach kids how they leverage the tool, right? And probably last year when I was at a national conference, I heard probably the best analogy to AI. A little bit different, but I think, they said the AI conversation today is the calculator conversation from 40 years ago, right? Where people were so afraid kids were going to lose math skills because the calculator was going to do it. What evolved? We taught kids how to apply math skills to the calculator to become more efficient. Problem solving.
Right.
How do we become more efficient in our math? You don't have to long division or do this, but if you understand the application of it and the tool can help you do it faster, you're going to be more efficient in your work.
Right.
AI, I think, is going to be the same thing as long as we're willing
Right.
to look at it for what it is and put parameters around its use and to teach kids that they have to apply a thought process to it.
Right.
It's an efficiency tool when you interact with it.
Right.
The more you prompt it, it gets what am I trying to say? How am I trying to say it? Where great, ChatGPT might pull some research sources and has sped up my process instead of me going and finding the book and doing this and what I want to say. Boom, it lays it out, and then I can say, oh, but I want to try to say it this way. Or, have ChatGPT put something that I've written, help me clean it up, say it in a friendlier tone and say this. I'm trying to make this, here's the point I'm trying to make, can you help me say it in a more succinct way?
Right.
That's a very sophisticated skill set.
Right.
And if we can get kids to do that in lieu of just using it as the easy out, I think, again, we're going to get kids really prepared for life and for the world. In Norristown, GT, to kind of bring this back of what the work we're doing, we have an AI kind of task force that's working on this.
Okay.
And one of and you'll be very proud of your home state of North Carolina. Okay. We actually found they're a little bit ahead of the journey from a state level. I know PA more has some broad policy of you'll allow it, safeguards, you're not allowed to cheat and these things. We found in North Carolina kind of like a 5-level rubric for that they've made available to their K-12, and I think they're higher ed as well, where the teacher decides the level of AI use in any given academic task. And you think about, again, teaching kids responsible use of that. So it's everywhere from no AI, this has to be 100% human, to level 1, allowed to ID generate, but everything else has to be the student. I'm going to allow this to help me edit, either grammatically or for content or things like that. I'm going to allow it to do some actual writing things up to full AI use.
Right.
So to me, there's also that human input in terms of how we use it. So we're trying to tailor that to our context here in Norristown. How can we use that? But to me, yes, there's the technology there, but there's the humans deciding how it gets used. But then on the backside of it, so let's say a teacher says to a kid, I'm going to let you, it's going to be a level 2 assignment. So we're going to allow it for editing purposes. So not only do you have to turn in your final 5-paragraph essay on Romeo and Juliet, you need to submit all of your ChatGPT prompts so I can see what you did, right? And I think there, it's just a difference of how we're using the tech and doing that. Because you're right, there are there are tools currently like Turnitin.com that checks for plagiarism, right? There's these AI checkers that have already been proven that they're not very good at it. Right. I think you kind of alluded to that already. Right. But I think if we set the conditions for use and require kids to justify how they used it, again, we're teaching them how to appropriately use the school and to keep their brains active and not to use it as a shortcut. And then it does become about the efficiency that I think we're trying to use. And they've learned skills that they're going to be able to apply to life in the workforce, which I think is really what it's all about.
Yeah, I want to share a quick story about my own professional development journey. I just finished, in fact, yesterday, a semester-long class on AI from eCornell. So it's online, asynchronous, but a live professor to help kind of facilitate through it. And you would imagine that as an AI class, it'd be okay, not only okay, but expected that you would use AI. And so the professor designed the class in such a way that through a series of questions requires you to prompt the AI in such a way that you're interacting with it conversationally. And through that process, you're learning a tremendous amount. And the assignment that you turn in is the prompt. And most of my prompts averaged about 50 plus pages of prompts. And as I reflect back on the last 4 months in this course, now it's perhaps it's recency bias, but I feel like I've learned more in this class than any class that I can imagine in recent history. And yet AI generated pretty much every response, but it was the journey through the prompts where the learning happened.
Right.
And I credit the professor for doing a phenomenal job in designing the class, but I think for high school, for higher ed and for high school and for middle school teachers, the challenge will be, okay, how do I redesign the assignment in such a way that, to your point, there's tiers. I mean, there's still some things that we want students to learn without AI.
Right.
And this would be an example, this higher ed class I was just mentioning would be an example of, full AI is expected, not only allowable, but expected. But it's going to be more work for the teacher in that case, because they're going to have to very carefully think about how to design a learning experience through prompting. And so
I agree, GJ. And I'll tell you, one of our workforce conversations has been, again, I think you have to actually start using AI yourself to understand, again, the capabilities and great learning opportunities like you just shared. It really is about that prompting and the mental exercise you go through to have the efficiency come out the back end. But one of the things we started talking about, and again, some things I've learned in watching, some other people use AI, is like you said, the AI gets better and better in efficiency the more you feed it. One of the things where I kind of led to this rhetorical somewhat question, that I think we will need to answer as a district. But I said, if we get to the point, again, we're doing a good job of teaching kids a good prompting process, and kids are really being thoughtful, and they are, kind of pouring themselves into the AI. So, and again, this interactive piece and all of this, and the AI is learning, kind of about the learner and again, what they want and how they tailor it. But my rhetorical question to the group is, I said, as we go down this road a little bit longer, I said, here's going to be my question to the teacher that's going to accuse the kid of cheating, right? And let's say, they pick an appropriate level or do all those things, right? But I said, but if a kid comes back and shows a prompt, right, and the teacher said, well, this is all AI generated. But if a student is really invested in the prompting appropriately and the brain power and all of this, and the AI is picking up all the nuances and all those things, in essence, if you're the one feeding it and it's growing from you, isn't then the output really your work?
Right. It's a fascinating argument, and we're just in the very beginning of it. So we talked about kind of global trends. Let's talk about major successes and or challenges. And you can start with either, like a major success or a major challenge. What is the biggest success that you've experienced as a superintendent over the last 7+ years, or the biggest challenge?
I think they're interconnected, believe it or not. Because to me, sometimes you achieve your biggest successes when you overcome your biggest challenges.
Okay.
In the journey of Norristown, I think, my thoughts gravitate to two things that I think are what I'm most proud of is really, how we've reshaped our financial fortunes in the school district, and also how we have evolved very impactfully, meaningfully, teaching and learning in the school district. So, but there's an interconnectedness there as well, because, when you look at how to best serve kids, and I think people lose sight of this, it's all dollar driven. It's, as Norristown Area School District, it's hard to say, when you look at our mission, we're there to educate and inspire each and every child, right? All 8,000 students that we have and take care of 1,000 employees. It takes a lot of money to operate that size of an organization. And this year we're a $207 million budget. We're a $207 million company, 207, enterprise operation. And, going back, and not to belabor, we've been a historically and chronically underfunded school district. Given our size, given our demographics, I think we've ranked anywhere from 30th to probably 20th in the most underfunded school districts in the Commonwealth. So, you go back to when I started in the district 9 years ago and as superintendent now 7 years ago, or, a little over in my 7th year as superintendent. I'll vividly remember the day after I got appointed superintendent to take effect that summer, and our then chief financial officer came in my office and said, congratulations, so happy for you, so happy for us, but we need to have here's your first dose of reality. And I said, lay it on me. I said, I thought this was just going to be a happy day. And she came in and said, you're going to take over this summer and we're going to be broke. And I said, what do you mean? At the time, I think we were a $165 million budget that was projected to come out. And she said, yeah. She said, I know we're working on a $165 million budget, but she said, when July 1 comes, we might not have a single dollar in the bank. We may close with no fund balance, or no cash, no fund balance, no anything. But I mean, that was a sobering dose of reality of here you're taking over. There's that excitement of being, becoming a superintendent and being able to lead just, a great district and a great community. But knowing that, everything from paying your electric bill to making sure you meet payroll to purchasing instructional materials that are going to actually impact the lives of kids, and finding out in 3 months we're not going to have any money was a very, very, very sobering moment. And we went to work. It really was just, and I thank my team every single day for this, that, from cabinet to our leadership team to teachers to everybody, to say, what are we spending on and how can we look at redirecting our dollars differently? Is there things that from a financial systems and structures that need to look different? And I think, we found them quickly. End of year one, we closed with about $3 million in the bank. And, what I'm most proud of now, to kind of fast forward, here we are 7 years later from how dire we were. We've been able to, over the past 4 budgets, invest in 140 new positions in our school district. That is teachers, that is primarily teachers. It is support staff. It is some administrative staff as the infrastructure continues to build. We've been able to reduce class sizes. We've been able to add reading specialists for the first time. When I took over, we had 0 reading specialists in the district. We've been able to partner with great organizations like Lincoln Center here to contract for services for social work and mental health. Again, I think, GT, you remember when I first took over, we had 1 social worker in our district to serve 8,000 kids. Wow. And what was one of the things I came to you about? Is there a partnership we have? What's that dollar going to cost? And now I think we're in the dozens of mental health counselors that we contract with you for. Right. So we've been able to, because we've gotten our financial house in order, and I do need to thank the state. Again, that was that missing piece in terms of The state recognizing that, the damage they had done with their lack of financial support. We went through a string of great budgets that we were able to invest. But the other piece of where I say, our financial fortunes have changed is we saw our revenues increasing through state. We've done that with 4 straight budgets of not having to raise local property taxes. Where the 10 prior years, where you talk about, I'd say, the 3 cardinal sins of school budgeting.
Right.
You're raising taxes out of control, you're cutting staff, and you're cutting programs. And that was the decade prior to me taking over superintendent, because we were in survival mode. That's why when, the CFO came in and said, we're broke. State revenues were declining. And again, it was all of these financial pressures. And who was losing? Kids were. Because it was less staff, less teachers, less resources. We weren't staying on a teaching and learning refresh cycle on providing kids with the very best resources and materials. So, we sit here, we have healthy fund balance. We were able to establish a capital improvement fund 4 years ago. And now, because of our financial strength, the board just approved the scope of a $300 million capital renovation project for the district.
What does that entail?
Probably going to take me to retirement and beyond, UT. But we're talking about touching all 13 of our current school buildings very substantially with modernization. So, and again, this is where money allows us to do great things. Because we've established fund balance, we have capital reserve, we've invested in staff. Now that where we teach and learn has to follow. So the scope of this project is really, I think the board approved 6 kind of major prongs of this. One is, we do have some things to keep the lights on, keep everybody dry, keep everybody safe in the next 3 years. So it's about $30 million worth of work. There's going to be some short-term expansions at 3 of our schools to deal with some space issues. But the crux of it is that every building is going to get modernized within the scope of probably the next, probably 8 to 10 years. 4 major construction projects with new facilities or new additions coming to the district. And it was great work. We engaged our community with the architect we engaged about not just doing it to do it and leave everything alone. How do we reconfigure the district to best serve kids? And I'll tell you, our community stepped up with just great ideas. We committed to 5 themes in terms of we need to do better. We want to see better facilities, but it's going to be modernization. We're going to see a new addition at the high school as that population has continued, number-wise has continued to grow. We're going to reconfigure our middle schools and go from 3 5-8 buildings to a 5-6 center, which will specialize in that upper elementary mindset, and a 7-8. So we're going to take 2 of our 3 buildings and put major additions on them. They're going to go from 3 middle schools at about 800 to 2 schools that are going to be about 1,200. Wow. So it's going to look very, very, very different. And then elementary, right now we have 7 buildings. We have 3 K4, 3 1-4 because of the size of their building, and a kindergarten-only building. So the 3rd middle school, Bloxon, which is going to turn 100 years old next year, which is part of this whole journey about why we're investing in our buildings. We're actually going to, the community said this, as much as, there is some sentimental value. The building itself at 100 years old has too many issues to try to salvage. We actually are planning to tear that down and build a 7th K4 elementary school. So all of our schools will be K4 and do some attendance zone adjustments so that, again, one of the things that our community said is the neighborhood school model works in Norristown. Yeah. It works. Our middle school realignment was a couple things about, there was some sentiment about 5th graders not being in the building with 8th graders. And I think developmentally at GT, in all your years in education, there's a lot of research about age appropriateness. You'd have 11-year-old with really teenagers, 14-year-olds. Very, very different needs in terms of expectations, so getting them separated. But also our community said in doing this middle school plan, right now, going from 7 neighborhood elementaries to 3 middles, the first time our kids come together is 9th grade. And our community said, no, we're a community, we're Norristown. Our kids should come together sooner. So the new plan has the ability to do that in 5th grade now. But all of this is really addressing that, right now, our newest school building just turned 32 years old. Wow. Our next newest school building is our high school and just celebrated its 50th anniversary. Most of our buildings are between 60 and 75. The maintenance and all of that is it's just incredible. The cost to maintain, the cost to repair. And again, when you go through a decade of underfunding, we just haven't kept up. We've always done things on an emergency basis. And I think my biggest, push to do this work was, number one, we've got to break that cycle, right? We've got to break the cycle of chasing the problems. Like, let's get proactive, let's get preventative. But the other thing was really looking at our kids. We can sit there as adults and say, wow, there's history there. There's vintage there. There's stories there. GT, what do kids see? They see old and ugly,
Right.
And we're trying to put kids, and we're trying to have them be excited to come to school every day and bring their best and be inspired to learn. They're not doing that when it's an old dingy, and listen, we've invested in our buildings, but, you see, we've heard from our kids when they've traveled, particularly our high school kids, when they, for sports or through academic competitions. Been a lot of new high school construction and middle school construction in this region. Right. And they go to these other schools and they're like, just, wow, wish we had that. Well, guess what? We're going to get to deliver that for them now.
Yeah, talk a little bit about what portion of the $300 million is like innovative, like future, like 21st century learning. You talked a little bit about the open space earlier when we were. So a portion of it I know needs just to get up to standard, as you mentioned. Right. But then talk about some of the like future pushing kind of initiatives that you're doing.
Yeah. So as you said, GT, I think a good portion of this is, we've got, again, warm, safe, and dry. So we know we're touching roofs. We know we're touching HVAC systems, parking lots, doors and windows. I would call that the kind of the non-sexy part of that.
Right.
The things that people don't see, right? We do those things. I mean, we've had to keep up with those just to stay open.
Right.
And no one sees that. And then they're questioning, what did we just spend $20 or $30 million on? We see no change on that. So it's really the forward-facing piece that we really want to focus on. I started this year as Student Advisory Council in all 12 of our schools. So once a quarter, I'm meeting with student representatives at every school. And just to say, hey, what do you like about the district? Where are some areas for growth? And so this quarter, our whole focus has been, now that the board's approved the scope of the plan, what do you want to see?
So you get a voice of the student.
The voice of the students.
That's really cool.
So we went through, when we developed the scope, the voices of our parents, our community organizations, our staff, about, again, the big things. Should we reconfigure? Right. How big should we go on additions? Is everybody okay if we readjust attendance zones? Those are adult decisions. Now that we're getting into this, because we have a meeting later this week with our architect, we're going to start putting pencil to paper to start drawing out the high school addition. I want to hear from kids. What are the kind of spaces that you want as learners that are going to make you feel good about coming to school? Again, all of, when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy, all those basal needs that are going to we meet those so the kids can focus on the higher things, creativity, really get the brains fully engaged, because they're walking into just spaces that meet, kind of the unconscious part of their learning. They're in a space they're comfortable. They have some choice on seating, all these, lighting, air conditioning, natural light. Yeah. So, and the kids' voices have been amazing. So, like I said, I'm doing this exercise of like, tell me what you want, and it's again, interesting where high school kids articulate it and elementary kids want to draw it. But again, they're all talking about spaces where there's elements of student choice. Right. They said, we've got to get away from where you walk in and it's the old, I'll call them the sled desk, the attached metal desk with, this thing, and it's all rows in this. They want options. And they recognize, they can't sit there and have plush couches and do all stuff like that all over the place, or their recliners at home. But, where we have started to invest already through, another partnership grant where we transformed our libraries into these flexible seats, much like the space you have here. Your common space here, where there's soft seating, there's tall, there's shorts, there's meeting tables, just different ways to collaborate. Yeah. We've started introducing that in our school libraries through another grant that we've done with Flux Space and Corbett here in Norristown. That's the kids are saying, like, we love when we're here. It gives us this inspiration. We're empowered to take some ownership of our own learning. They're like, if we could have that in every classroom. They're talking about natural light. They're talking about things like, and this sounds like so minor, can we make sure that every water fountain in the school has a bottle fill station?
Yep.
Can we, things like, carpet versus tile versus the paint choices. Their voices are really, really being up. And it's given us great, great, great things of, to me, where I think education should be going anyway, right?
Yeah.
Getting kids ready for a 21st century, a future-facing workforce, and not being held back by the limitations of underfunding, number one, but the limitations of the adults whose learning experiences were very different. When you and I were in high school just 5 years ago, I know GT was a little bit longer than that, right? But our experiences were very, very different. And we need to prepare kids for the now and for the future. And classrooms have to look different. And that's really our focus. We build in a very specific goal in our comprehensive plan, 2 steps. One was to develop the master plan, but second was to identify the needed infrastructure for a meaningful and modern learning experience.
Right.
We shouldn't be defining that. Our kids should be driving that conversation. So when you talk about where the lot of that infrastructure dollars are going to be, it's going to be, how do we refresh classrooms and make them have that feel that's going to get kids to want to be educated, and in our mission statement, want to be inspired every single day. And how do we create really those conditions through furniture, instructional materials, the technology they get to interact with, like every piece of everything to drive that. And that's where I think the lion's share of the money is hopefully going to go. I mean, listen, HVAC systems cost a ton of money, but we've got to be thoughtful about the forward-facing things that are going to get our parents saying, the district's investing in my kids, and get our kids saying, I'm excited to come to school because the adults believe in me and care about me because they've given us these amazing modern spaces to come to school in every day.
I appreciate you sharing that. So you mentioned the capital piece. Let's talk about the programming piece. Mm-hmm. And as you know, our podcast is particularly interested in addition to education, mental health and behavioral health. Mm-hmm. Speak to some of the programs going on in Norristown, in particular the ones related to emotional, social emotional learning, or mental health or behavioral health support.
No, absolutely. GT, going back, I think we started saying, what were the successes? And I think, we talked about the financial success. The second really has been on the programming side of our house, where we've come so far with teaching and learning. When I got there as assistant superintendent, my first job in Norristown, the first 2 years, I was in charge of everything academic. And I remember walking in, as I was leading up to transition, and said, hey, can I just get scope and sequence for curriculum to give me some idea about what the materials were there? And without belaboring the point, it was pretty stark. There wasn't a lot of vertical alignment. There wasn't a lot of defined. It was like buy the book, follow the book, which is not an ideal model at all. So I spent 2 years trying to get a curriculum cycle back into place. Dr. Yolanda Williams, who's our assistant superintendent now, I give her all the credit in the world for where we are today. I kind of felt like I started to build the system. And when I brought her in, I said, I want you to take this and own it and take it to the next level. And she has just absolutely blown it out of the water with, we have articulated curriculum in every grade for every content. We're now on a second purchase cycle, again, where finances of, when I got there, we were a shoestring of even trying to buy the new math books for kids. We've now done a second investment and have bought literally a Cadillac program for the kids. They don't want for anything in terms of math instruction, math resources. We've done the same with language arts. We've done the same we're getting ready for the next wave of science instruction, STEELs, that we're going to do probably a several $1 million investment this year in new science and STEAM learning materials. So again, and the results are starting to follow. When you connect absolutely defined outcomes with high expectations, with the right staffing levels and small class sizes, and the right materials to do it, what's happening? Growth is off the charts. We just got back our state growth data, which is called PVAS. Everywhere from red, where kids are not even making kind of minimal year to year, to dark blue, which is kids are exceeding annual growth targets. Every but one of our grades was dark blue across the board in reading, in math, and science. Phenomenal. And that to me is saying because we're making the right investments there.
Right.
But it's also, GT, to your point of how very holistically, or what I'll call holistically, we're taking care of kids. Because we can focus on all of the teaching and learning, and I'll say the tactical pieces. You need to learn to read and write. You need to know science. You need to know this set of standards. But we believe in educating the whole child. And if you're not taking care of them and taking care of them very completely, as complete individuals, as a complete person, teaching's not going to happen. I
Right.
mentioned Maslow in the beginning. You don't take care of those basal those basic needs. They're safe, they're warm, they're fed, their mental health is in peace. You're never going to get to getting them to learn algebra or calculus or the cell cycle or, why, the Treaty of Paris was so an important document, right? Because they're not going to care.
Right.
And, we've been very, very intentional, especially coming out of COVID and, just nationally. I don't want to say COVID caused the mental health crisis we're seeing. I think it exacerbated it, and I think it exposed it. I think there was a lot of things that were in place there before. So we've been very, very intentional, both through district funds and a lot of grant partnerships. I want to thank you and the team here as we partnered. I think the entire 7 years we've known each other about how can we work together for Lincoln Center to support Norristown and for Norristown to be a good partner in service to Lincoln Center. And it's really been how can we provide, social work services, home and school services, mental health counselors with our kids, because we know there's desperate need there. And how do we do, that on the school level? But, as we were talking with, one of your team members beforehand, how are we connecting kids that need those deeper services outside of that as well? And with a lot of our mandated costs, when we hire people, we're not able to bring on all that staff. So, we do look for good partners that, can attract and retain great people, highly credentialed people, highly skilled workers. And that's, to me, I think kind of sums up our partnership, right? Yeah. I think some of the proudest ones are, going back to the original PCCD grant, which I think got the journey going, where I said, GT, I think at the time we had one contracted social worker district. And I said, one person can't serve 8,000 kids in our district. Just not impossible. And I think it came to us, what can we do? Came with a great contract. And I think the first one was 8 mental health counselors. Right. So we literally increased our capacity to serve the mental health needs of kids by 800% because of one grant that we got.
Yeah. I would like to make a shout out to PCCD, which is the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. They've been a great partner of ours and provided a lot of funding that we can give back to the community, including Norristown. So, they have PCCD has helped us fund quite a bit of social workers and counselors, not only in Norristown, but the greater Philadelphia area. Oh,
they have been. And again, this is where I thank the state as they have really sought to invest differently in schools, both whether it be through grant programs through PCCD or the Department of Economic Development or through PDE directly. Yeah. They've made these buckets of money available and said go to work with it. I think you and I always bang our heads when we say it's one-time money though. We need things that are going to be funded a little bit more sustainably and I'll say eternally. Right. But I think again our partnership has allowed us to say we've seen the value. We've seen how how we've been able to help kids and families so significant. And again, that started, I think, with 8. I think we're now, 3 or 4 other separate kind of grant funded contracts. I think we're in the 20s alone on the mental health counselors. And then our Roosevelt campus, which serves for our podcast audience, our high school main campus is a very traditional comprehensive high school, about 2,400 kids there. We also operate our Roosevelt campus, which is used to be an alternative school. Doesn't serve that way anymore. It's a comprehensive campus, but it really is that small, more supportive setting that for kids where they have needs that are not met, in a big setting like that. So we have Roosevelt that's 200 kids that some need credit recovery, some need some more mental health. And talking with Ashley about just the success coach model that we brought over there. They're focusing on academics and social pieces and emotional pieces and behavioral pieces and kids that probably are really highly at risk to drop out, that we're keeping them in school, we're keeping them engaged because again, those coaches are so holistically just meeting the needs. What do you asking the students, what do you need today? Cool, let me work with you on that. And it might be, getting caught up on an English class, or it might be, oh my God, this is going on in my life, and just making sure that they're staying positive and focused and supported. But yeah, I mean, I think it's been the approach of, recognizing just the deep needs of kids, also how we've been able to embed in some of the more discrete contracts, like our Gear Up partnership that's been, now going probably for the better part of a decade or more. Right. Gear Up is a federal grant program that starts in 6th grade to get kids better connected to more positive post-secondary outcomes. Right. And I think our model in, how you help us staff that and provide the supports. It's not only the academic and we'll say college and career coaching, but I think we were very intentional to say we need those social work, mental health counselors working with those kids too. And again, just seeing how that tracks from sixth grade all the way through that 1 year post high school, and just seeing the tremendous success of our kids. How we're seeing more and more kids, number one, get to graduation that are supported through Gear Up, and the more positive outcomes. They're going to college and or trade school and or military and or keeping a job and being successful at higher rates because of all the supports they had on their life journey. The adults that, through Lincoln Center that are helping kids very holistically, academic skills, social skills, emotional skills, behavioral skills. Then when they turn 18 and are those young adults, they're so much better equipped to be successful in the world. Yeah. So you've been an amazing partner that way. And again, it makes it easy every time another grant opportunity comes up, or like with that original PCCD, where I think that grant's been expired now a couple years, GT. And to me, the value we saw with the mental health counselors, period, but also the quality of the team and the staff and our partnership was when that grant came up, and we were in better financial shape, working with Casey Molitor, who's our Chief Student Services Officer, and Casey goes, we can't lose these services. Our commitment to be able to then move what was grant funded over to district funded to continue those services and a continued relationship, I think has been, and again, to continue to reap the benefits for kids was a no-brainer on our part.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. And of course, Norristown's been a fantastic partner. So you've spoken now a lot about Norristown, the Norristown community. Your passion for the community and for the students is coming out loud and clear. I want to move into the kind of the third and final part of our discussions. We talked about Norristown. We talked about Norristown community. We talked about kind of global trends. Now I want to go a little bit deeper and just talk about you. And so the name of our podcast is TLC Connections. And one of the questions we'd like to ask all of our guests is, as you think back on how Chris Dormer became a superintendent, we'll go way back, as early as you need to do, elementary, middle. Can you think of a choice that either you made or somebody else in your circle made? Or can you think of a connection that you made that kind of set that trajectory, set that through a series of choices and connections led to you becoming a superintendent?
I will tell you that, I've been truly blessed in my life. From just an incredible family, parents, supportive, collectively teachers and coaches. I was a competitive swimmer, so many just impactful coaches in my life, that again, just, supported me, the opportunities, bred the work ethic, bred the, the desire to do my very best, and that, again, that starts at home with my parents, that was, my mom and my dad, just the balance of, the, two very different people. My dad was an accountant. My mom was a Catholic school teacher. You talk about the earliest influences of, being a servant leader. You think back, 40, 50 years ago, teaching in Catholic school was the epitome of servant leadership because you weren't getting paid very much to do the work. I think really, the one person that's popping into my head right now that, and again, it was this interesting kind of inflection point in my own educational journey when I was in college. So I talked about, I always had this affinity for kind of math and science and, high school overloaded, actually had the opportunity to take like freshman biology when I was actually a senior in high school at Villanova and, took, just AP everything and just loved science. So went into college, very much of like, I'm going to go be a doctor, right? Was always, did well, top part of the class, honors classes, AP classes. And, it was like, yeah, listen, I aspire to that level. I know it's going to be a lot of work, not shy from the work. Interesting experience though, when you get into it where, you're like, and you see what it's going to be, the people you're going to be with, for this long period of time, like, not only college, graduate school, medical school, residencies, all those pieces. But my sophomore year in college, and again, like I think I mentioned, I was a competitive swimmer all the way through, swam, academic / athletic scholarship, LaSalle University,
Right.
pre-med there. So it was a bio major, kind of their pre-med track. Sophomore year, sustained a season-ending knee injury, which I know with swimmers doesn't sound right, but
Right.
when you have an 80% tear your ACL and need full reconstructive surgery, your season's over.
Right.
And at the time I was taking, and I remember this, I was taking kind of like Bio 3 intro, and was taking organic chemistry, which again, organic chem, if you've ever been in there,
Yeah.
is not a class for the faint of heart.
Right.
And, in addition to everything else, going on, I think I was taking, microbio and some other stuff.
It's a common weed out class.
It is 100%, 100%. So here I am, I get, I sustained the injury right around Halloween, both for, we'll say academic and athletic reasons, look to do the surgery over Thanksgiving, and you can imagine that time between Halloween and Thanksgiving, doctor's appointments and just like out the wazoo and doing all this. And I'm trying to maintain this science heavy with labs and the whole bit. And, but Dr. Jim Price was my organic chem teacher. And the humanity that he showed me, like you said, in this science, high intensity, majority of people there aspired to med school, very academically competitive, kind of track we were in. Like this was, the science major, we're mixing with the chem majors, which are, on a completely different level in terms of chem.
Right.
And, trying to keep up while I'm dealing with all of this, the medical pieces, the intensity, if I was healthy and all that, with, the academic pieces, let alone, now the mental and emotional pieces, right? Here I am, a Division I athlete, and literally one of the most important pieces of my life completely ripped away, at that point, could barely practice, kind of taken away from, somewhat, and my team was great, but like you said, you're not in that same routine, right? You're not there, you're not in the pool with them to, 4 hours a day, you're not lifting weights anymore. I'm missing classes to go to doctor's appointments and all this stuff going on, trying to navigate, all these different parts of my life that are just completely, thrown into upheaval. And, and here I am on crutches pre-surgery and post-surgery because the tear was so severe. And, like when you go into organic, they're like, hey, there's a 3-hour lab period, but please understand that's more of a guideline. Like you're going to be here 5-6 hours a day in organic chem lab, right? And here I am missing classes because of doctor's appointments and trying to get on track, and also physically debilitated. That like, how the heck am I going to be in a organic chem lab on crutches because I can't bear my own weight? Sitting down is sort of an option, but not really. And then here's Dr. Price showing me care, showing me just empathy of, because he could have sat there and said, dude, you're an old, figure it out. And if you don't, oh, well, you fail,
Right.
which back when you and I were in college GT was kind of,
Not unusual.
I remember enrolling as a freshman, and it was this exercise of turn to your left, turn to your right. One, he's not going to be here in 6
Right.
months. And oh, well,
Right.
like this mantra of like, you need to step up and you're going to meet professors' expectations. And if you don't, you're going to flunk out, and oh, well, you got to deal with the financial consequences and the academic consequences. And here's this professor saying, I see you.
Right.
And what can I do? What can I do to help you?
Right.
And how can I work with you through all of this and keep you on track and doing all that? And it was such a wow moment for me. And it was interesting because not at that time was I starting to, really look at, do I want to go med school? And I want to do that. Because the 2 summers prior, as I graduated high school, I was able to start coach swimming. Going from, just where it always was, the athlete, to now like got to be an assistant coach for younger kids, and was starting to get compliments of, wow, you work great with kids, have you ever thought about going into education? You're very natural in how you can break things down and the care you do. And then here's this inflection point with Dr. Price showing me just unbelievable care and humanity. And just not only like, don't worry about labs, let me spend some time when you can get here. Let's get you caught up. Let's modify. And again, just like was very just tuned in what I needed as not only a learner, but a human being. And it just stuck with me. To the point senior year when, they at LaSalle, they did kind of a senior banquet and invite whoever, please invite a faculty member to celebrate. I hadn't had Jim in 2 years. I did take him for organic too. I didn't have Jim for 2 years, and he was the guy I said, I want you to be here with me to celebrate. But it really got me when I think I made that final decision of like, I'm pivoting from pre-med to education. That was why, Wow. I said, I want to work with kids. I want to make a difference in the life of kids. And, everything I was raised to believe in terms of how you care for people, Jim showed me that. And it was, again, there was that true inflection point of like, it really drove me to say, I want to be an educator. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a Jim Price to somebody else. And I think that's been a hallmark of me. And GT, as you go through your career, when you start at, first in whatever industry, for me as a teacher, and it's that interaction with those 20 or 30 kids that you have. I started actually as a one-on-one aide, as supporting an emotional support student in Lower Merion School District. That was that direct impact. Like, well, what can I do to help this little young guy with just very, very unique needs? And then eventually getting certified as a teacher and then classroom. But I've always tried to keep the lens of how can I have that personal impact on kids? And as you know, as the CEO level, sometimes you don't get to make that personal impact.
Right.
But to me, I think it is you have that responsibility to always tie back high-level decision to that. How is it going to impact GT or Chris or Susie or Jamar or like whoever the learner is, right? Yeah. And I always go into, when we make budget decisions, as I talked about, Norristown's a $207 million operation, right? And I'm trying to budget staffing with taxes and all these things. But at the end of the day, how am I serving Jillian? What in that budget is going to make sure that she gets the care and the service in doing that? And is there anything I can do to personally connect and say, I'm here for you, I believe in you? Because I think in the speed when we talked about the speed at which the world operates, education is still about relationships.
Yeah.
It's about the interaction and that intersectionality of people. And that, to me, I think we need to slow ourselves down to say it's about the kid. And I think, unfortunately, too many people, because we're pressed with pacing guides and all these other things, like what does the child need today?
Yeah.
And sometimes they just need a kind word. Sometimes they need a Jim Price to just, to look at Chris Dormer, whose world absolutely was turned upside down, and say, I got you. Don't worry about it. I'm going to work with you. We're going to figure this out together.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's you use the word as you're describing Jim Price, care, empathy, kindness, what you refer to in Norristown as essential skills. Mm-hmm. That's ultimately what it's all about. I think that story is a powerful one and it's a good one to end on. So I just want to thank you for your time. Maybe you spent way too much more time out of a very busy schedule, I'm sure,
GT
than I anticipated.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I love to tell our story in Norristown. Like you said, I think we have a lot of work still to do. We've put a lot of work in, but, we're really proud of where we're at. And there are much, much, much more successes and great things to come. And the opportunity to share our journey, I think, is an important one. And thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about me. I really try to operate as a superintendent. I know you do the same. How do you set others up for success? Right. And sometimes, you do that with, as much as, everyone in the podcast knows I'm a talker. Like everyone in Norristown knows I'm a talker, and you've known that, right? But sometimes it's if my story can help inspire somebody else, then I'm happy to tell it. But, my whole goal is what can I do for you to set you up for success? And whether that is my assistant superintendent, my cabinet team, a teacher, all the way down to a parent, a child, a community member.
Yeah.
That's what we try to do in Norristown. And I try to live that every day as an example.
And that's very
and
clear.
I appreciate the opportunity to share my story and our story, and just want to thank you for for our friendship and the great partnership we have with Lincoln in achieving that mission in Norristown to be there for each and every child.
Thank you, Chris Dormer.
Appreciate you.
All
Thank
right.
you, GT.
All right. See you.
TLC Connections is supported in part by the Lincoln Center for Family and Youth. Through education, counseling, coaching, and consulting, we empower people to make positive choices, meaningful connections, and transformational change. To learn more, visit thelincolncenter.com.